My name is Mara Bennett. I'm 34 years old. And by the time my sister raised her plastic wine glass at our family picnic, I already knew she had been waiting all afternoon to embarrass me. You know the kind of moment I mean. Everybody is smiling too hard. Everybody is chewing too slowly. Everybody can feel something ugly coming. But nobody says a word because they want to show more than they want peace. That was the air around the folding tables by the lake that evening. Burgers were still smoking on the grill. Kids were running in wet grass. And my family was pretending we were the kind of people who only gathered for laughter. Then my sister stood, tapped her cup with a fork, and smiled in that bright, polished way that always looked sweet from a distance and cruel up close. Here's to the one who always shows up broke, needy, and still hoping to matter. My mother laughed first. My father looked down and smiled into his plate. A couple of cousins followed, because that is what weak people do when cruelty wears a confident face. I picked up my drink, stood slowly, and looked straight at her. Then let's raise one, I said to the desperate one who borrows from the person she mocks, lies about it in front of family, and still expects applause. The whole yard went still. Her smile dropped. My father finally looked up. My mother went pale, and my sister, for the first time in her life, looked scared instead of superior. Before I tell you what happened next, and what was said after I stopped protecting everybody's lies, tell me what time is it for you right now, and where are you watching from? I'm curious to see how far this story will travel. Vanessa recovered fast because that was one of her favorite talents. She could fall on her face in public and still make it look like the floor had offended her. She gave a short laugh, touched the rim of her sunglasses, and said, "Wow, Mara, so we're doing this at a family picnic." The tone was soft, but the message was clear. I was the problem for answering, not her for starting. That had been the family pattern for years. She cut, I bled, and then everyone asked why I was making such a mess. "You started it," I said. Don't act shocked because I finally answered. My mother, Carol, leaned forward with that breathy voice she used whenever she wanted to smooth things over without actually correcting anyone. "Girls, not here, not now. Not in front of people." That was always the rule when Vanessa crossed a line. The problem was never the wound. The problem was always that somebody might see it. Vanessa shrugged like she was bored. "I was making a joke. You always do this. You turn everything into a drama because you're insecure." Some of the cousins looked away. Others watched with the kind of fascination people usually reserve for car wrecks. I set my cup down on the table before I crushed it in my hand. "A joke?" I said. "You borrowed $3,000 from me in February because your commission check was delayed. You borrowed $900 in April for your car. You borrowed again in June because the rent on your downtown apartment was due, and you didn't want your fiancé to know you were behind." Which part was the joke? Her face changed at the edges first. That was the thing about Vanessa. She had trained her mouth better than her eyes. Her smile stayed up for one more second, but the panic had already surfaced. "You didn't have to say numbers," she snapped. "Exactly," I said. "You didn't have to toast me like I was your family charity case." A low murmur spread down the tables. My uncle stopped turning the corn on the grill. One of my younger cousins stared at Vanessa the way kids stare when adults accidentally reveal they are not gods after all. Jenna, my friend from work, who had come because she thought a lakeside picnic sounded peaceful, stood near the cooler with a paper plate in her hand and looked at me like she had just understood 3 years of conversations I had never fully explained. Vanessa crossed her arms. "So now you want a medal because you helped your sister a few times." "No," I said. "I wanted basic respect. That would have cost you less." That landed harder than I expected. Even my father, Richard, shifted in his chair. He had spent years mistaking my silence for resilience. To him, because I handled things, I needed nothing. Because Vanessa complained loudly, she must have needed more. That is how some families divide love. Not by fairness, but by who creates the most noise. Vanessa stepped closer. "Tell them the rest, Mara. Tell them how you act like you're better than everybody because you have your sad little jobs and your saving spreadsheets and your thrift store clothes. You want everybody here to think you're some saint? Fine. Tell them how impossible you are. Tell them how you judge everyone." I laughed once because that was almost impressive. She had taken her dependence on me and translated it into my arrogance. I restored damaged documents for the State Museum all day, I said. Then I spend nights at a frame shop so I can keep my own life stable. I don't drink my paycheck. I don't lease luxury I can't afford. I don't insult people who cover for me. A hush passed across the yard again, but this one felt different. Not empty, heavy. The kind that arrives when the room realizes it has been listening to the wrong person for years. Vanessa looked toward our parents, waiting for rescue. That was when I knew she was more afraid than angry. People who feel powerful attack. People who feel exposed look for backup. My mother tried first. "Mara, sweetheart, enough," she said. But her voice had lost authority. She sounded less like a parent and more like someone praying a fire would put itself out. My father cleared his throat. "This doesn't need to become a spectacle." I turned to him. Then why was everybody comfortable when I was the spectacle 5 minutes ago? He had no answer for that. He just looked toward the lake, as if sunlight on the water might offer an escape route. Vanessa saw the hesitation and got reckless. "You're unbelievable," she said. "After everything this family has done for you, you stand here, acting like a victim." That almost made me laugh again. Not because it was funny, but because it was so shameless. "What exactly has this family done for me, Vanessa?" I asked. "Say it clearly." She opened her mouth, then closed it. She was good at tone, implication, insult, performance. She was much weaker with facts. My Aunt Diane, who had always adored Vanessa's polished life and expensive hair, jumped in from the far end of the table. "Your parents have always included you, Mara. They've always supported you girls equally." "Equally," I said. "That's interesting." I reached into my tote bag and pulled out the small accordion folder I carried because I had stopped trusting my own family's version of history. "Some people journal for healing. I keep records. Museum work that to you. When you spend your days preserving evidence, you stop treating memory like truth just because it sounds emotional." "Mara," my mother said sharply, seeing the folder. "Don't." "No," I said, "today we do this properly." I opened the folder and took out several copies of bank transfers, printed texts, and one handwritten note Vanessa had once left in my mailbox asking me not to tell anyone she was short on rent again. I did not wave them dramatically. I did not shout. That would have let everyone dismiss me as emotional. I simply placed the papers on the table beside the potato salad like receipts arriving for a meal nobody wanted to pay for. February 12th, I said $3,000 memo line temporary. Don't tell mom and dad. April 4th, $920 for your car repair. June 21st, $1,500 because Liam thought you had already covered your half of rent. August 2nd, $800 for the destination bachelorette trip you swore you couldn't back out of because appearances mattered. Vanessa went white, not embarrassed. White. One of my cousins whispered, "Oh my God," loud enough for half the table to hear. Aunt Diane stopped talking. My father stared at the papers like they were written in a language he had hoped never to learn. "You kept receipts?" Vanessa asked. "Of course I did," I said. "You taught me to." That was the first truly honest sentence of the evening. I had not started my 20s suspicious. I became suspicious after too many stories changed when she retold them to other people. After snorts, too many favors became proof that she was generous because she allowed me to help. After too many humiliations came dressed as jokes. Jenna quietly moved from the cooler to stand near me. She did not touch me or interrupt. She just stood there, which was somehow more powerful than all the speeches people could have made. Vanessa looked at our parents again. "Are you really going to let her do this?" she demanded. My father rubbed a hand over his jaw. "Did you borrow this money?" She hesitated. That was all the answer anybody needed. "That's private," she said finally. "No, I said it was private when I was protecting you. You made it public when you used me for a punchline." She took a step toward the papers, and I put my hand over them. "Don't," I said quietly. "You've been rewriting me for years. You don't get to rewrite documents, too." A few relatives actually looked down then, ashamed. Not all of them. Some people will watch injustice for a decade and still think the real offense is when the victim becomes articulate. Snorts, but enough of them shifted that I could feel the balance changing. Vanessa sensed it too. That was why her next move was so ugly. She looked at me and said, "Maybe if you weren't bitter about ending up alone, you wouldn't be this obsessed with money." The cruelty of that line was deliberate. She knew exactly where to aim. I had ended an engagement 2 years earlier after discovering my fiancé had quietly opened a credit card in both our names and expected me to absorb the debt because I was better with responsibility. My sister knew how painful that season had been. She knew I had spent months rebuilding my finances and my trust, and she used it anyway, right there between the paper plates and lemonade. I looked at her for a long moment. "That's fine," I said. "Keep talking." Her chin lifted, mistaking calm for weakness. "No, really. Tell them more. Tell them how miserable you are. Tell them why you can't stand seeing other people happy." "Happy?" I repeated. "Vanessa, you aren't happy. You're expensive." That one froze the room again. My uncle coughed into his fist to hide a laugh. One cousin failed to hide it at all. Vanessa heard that, and humiliation finally broke through her polish. "You jealous, bitter little." "Finish that sentence," I said, "and I'll read the text where you called me crying from the grocery store because your card declined and you said, 'Please answer. You're the only one who ever fixes Clear's throat this.'" That did it. She stopped. For the first time in my adult life, my sister had reached the edge of what performance could save. I should tell you something about humiliation in families. It rarely arrives as one big event. It is usually years of tiny permissions. One mean joke no one corrects. One favor never repaid. One daughter praised for sparkle while the other is praised for endurance. As if endurance is not just neglected love, wearing sturdy shoes. Standing there at that picnic with receipts on a folding table and my sister shaking with anger, I understood that I was not ending a single fight. I was ending a role. "Here's what happens now," I said. "Since we all like public statements so much, let's make one. From today forward, I am done covering your rent, your bills, your emergencies, your image, and your lies." Vanessa gave a short, disbelieving laugh. "You're being dramatic." "No, I'm being exact." I took one sheet from the stack and held it up. Total unpaid amount, including the money you promised to return last summer, $7,280. My mother made a soft sound under her breath. My father looked at Vanessa with a kind of stunned disappointment I had never seen directed at her before. She saw it too, and it rattled her more than anything I had said. "I was going to pay it back," she said. "When?" I asked. "After the next brunch, after the next spray tan, after the next lease renewal on an apartment you can't afford?" "Mara," my mother said, but there was no conviction in it, only fear. Vanessa's fiancé, Liam, who had been helping with the grill and avoiding the center of the drama like a man trying not to step on a landmine, finally walked over. "Wait," he said slowly. "You told me your bonus covered the back rent." Vanessa turned toward him, so fast I thought she might snap. "This is not the time." "Actually," he said, "it seems like exactly the time." That changed the shape of everything. Until then, Vanessa had still been fighting me from high ground, but now somebody from her own carefully managed life had discovered he had been standing on cardboard scenery. "You lied to me?" he asked. "Don't do this here," she hissed. I almost pied her then, almost. But pity is dangerous when you have spent years confusing it with obligation. "You lied to everyone," I said. "And every time I stayed quiet, you used my silence to build a better version of yourself." She pointed at me. "You love this. You love making me look bad." "No, I said you did the looking bad part yourself. I just stopped editing." There it was. The sentence I wish I had learned at 25 instead of 34. My father stood up from his chair. He was not a large man, but in that moment he seemed older than I had ever seen him. Not weak, just tired. Tired in the way people look when they realize their comfort has been financed by someone else's restraint. "Vanessa," he said, "is the number real?" She hesitated again. "It's not that simple." "That means yes," I said. My aunt tried once more to rescue the mood. "Families help each other." I looked right at her. "Families don't mock the person helping them and call it a toast." That shut her up for good. Liam stepped back from Vanessa as if he physically needed distance to think. "You said Mara was always asking for help," he said quietly. "You told me she was irresponsible." Vanessa opened her mouth, But there was nothing left that would sound believable. That was when the first real consequence landed. Not in private, but in front of everybody. It was not loud. It was worse. People began to move away from her. Not dramatically, just enough. A cousin who had been standing near her drifted toward the drinks table. Aunt Diane sat down and looked at her lap. My mother stopped trying to soothe. My father stopped defending the peace at all costs. Vanessa was still in the middle of the yard, but she was suddenly alone. I gathered the papers back into a neat stack. "I'll send you a repayment schedule tonight," I said. "If you ignore it, I'll consider the money a lesson fee and never answer another emergency call from you again." She stared at me. "You'd cut off your own sister." I'd stop funding my own humiliation. Snorts. Then I looked at my parents, and before either of you asks me to be the bigger person, don't. I have been the bigger person so long. You all mistook it for my permanent shape. Nobody spoke. The breeze off the lake moved the edges of a tablecloth. A paper napkin lifted and fell. Somewhere behind us, one of the little kids asked if dessert was ready, which felt almost absurdly normal. That is what family ruptures are like. The world does not stop. It just reveals itself. People started leaving early after that, which would have offended my mother on any other holiday. But that evening, she barely noticed. A picnic built on appearances cannot survive the truth for very long. As relatives folded chairs and loaded coolers, I caught fragments of the news story spreading in low voices. I had no idea. 7,000. She called Mara broke. That's unbelievable. It was not everyone suddenly joining my side. Real life is slower than that. Some still thought I had gone too far. Some believed the old family religion that public peace matters more than private fairness. But the spell had broken, and once a family's spell breaks, it rarely returns in the same form. Vanessa tried twice to corner people into sympathy. First my aunt, then Liam. Neither conversation lasted long. Aunt Diane, who had spent years praising Vanessa's taste and charm, finally said the one useful thing I had ever heard from her. "I can't offend you tonight." Liam did not yell. He looked worse than angry men look. He looked embarrassed to have been made into an audience member in his own relationship. He handed the grilling tongs to my father, said he was taking a walk, and did not come back for nearly 40 minutes. I stood by the dock while the sky deepened into that dusky blue that makes everybody look softer than they are. Jenna came up beside me and offered me a bottle of water. "I used to think you were exaggerating," she said. "Not about her exactly, about how alone you felt in your own family." I took the bottle and nodded. Most people don't understand family scapegoats unless they've been one. "You were never broke," she said. "You were carrying people." I laughed quietly. That should be on a greeting card. But the truth of it settled into me harder than I expected. Because that was the insult at the center of everything, wasn't it? Broke, not financially, though they liked pretending that. In their minds, I was broke because I lived carefully, because I drove a 12-year-old car, because I wore my hair simple and my clothes practical and did not perform wealth for strangers, because I chose safety over spectacle after nearly letting the wrong man ruin my future. To Vanessa, restraint looked like failure because she had never learned the dignity of enough. I remembered a night 16 months earlier when she had called me crying from outside a boutique hotel downtown. She had been locked out after a birthday dinner, too embarrassed to ask Liam for money, too proud to admit she had spent her rent. I drove 40 minutes, brought her cash, sat in the car while she redid her lipstick in the mirror, and listened to her promise me it was the last time. 2 days later, she posted photos from that same dinner with the caption, "Blessed beyond measure." That memory had stayed with me because it captured the whole architecture of our relationship. I handled the invisible beams. She hosted people in the finished room. By the time the last cousins left, the yard looked tired, crushed cups in the grass, half a watermelon sweating on the table, a tray of buns gone stiff in the evening air. My parents stood near the patio, waiting for me, and I knew from the shape of their silence that the second part of the night had arrived. Not the public one, the honest one. Vanessa sat in a chair under the string lights with her arms wrapped around herself. She no longer looked glamorous. She looked cornered. Good, I thought, and then hated that thought for half a second before accepting it. Consequences always feel cruel to the people who never expected any. Mara, my father said, come sit down. I did not want to. Sitting suggests comfort, and I was not there to comfort anyone anymore. Still, I pulled out a chair and faced them. Jenna squeezed my shoulder once before heading to her car, giving me the kind of exit people give when they know the next conversation belongs to blood, history, and damage. My mother folded and unfolded a paper napkin in her lap. You blindsided us, she said. It was such a mother sentence. Not we failed you. Not we should have seen this. Blindsided us, as if the true injury had been our late arrival to the truth. No, I said. I've been signaling for years. You just didn't want to read it. My father looked at Vanessa. Go inside. She stared at him. Why am I the only one being treated like I did something wrong? He did not raise his voice. Because tonight you did. It was small. It was overdue. It was also the first time I had ever heard him say anything like that to her without cushioning it in 12 layers of explanation. Vanessa stood so abruptly her chair scraped the patio. She looked at my mother for rescue, found none, and went inside, slamming the screen door hard enough to rattle the frame. The sound hung in the air. My mother flinched. I did not. When the yard settled again, my father leaned forward with his forearms on his knees. How long has this been going on? He asked. Depends what you mean, I said. The borrowing about 4 years. The insults longer. The expectation that I'll absorb whatever she creates. Most of my adult life. My mother's eyes filled. Why didn't you tell us? I did. I said, just not in ways you respected. I said I was tired. I said I couldn't keep doing it. I said her comments were cruel. Every time I got told she was stressed or sensitive or didn't mean it or that I was stronger and should let things go. You two didn't hear me, because the role you gave me was useful. That landed where it needed to. My parents had spent years loving me. I do believe that. But they had loved me lazily. They loved the version of me that solved, absorbed, forgave, remembered birthdays, brought side dishes, answered late-night calls, and never demanded that the emotional economy of the family be audited. Once I stopped being that version, they were forced to meet the actual daughter in front of them, and she was tired. My mother spoke first, softly. We thought Vanessa needed more support. She's always been harder. That is not the compliment you think it is. I said, all it means is you taught her that difficulty gets rewarded. My father shut his eyes for a moment. Your mother's not wrong that she's always needed more managing and I was easier, I said. So you managed me by giving me less. Neither of them denied it. That was the first honest gift of the night. There are moments in family arguments when people can still escape into denial. This was no longer one of them. My mother looked up at me with that raw, unguarded expression parents sometimes have when they realize their children saw more than they intended. We were proud of you, she said. You were steady, capable. You never seemed like you needed rescuing. I didn't need rescuing. I said I needed fairness. I needed somebody to notice that being dependable is not the same thing as being unaffected. My father exhaled slowly. Did Vanessa ever pay back any of it? A few partial payments, I said. Enough to keep the story going. Never enough to change it. Then I told them more than I had planned to. About the grocery store call, about the hidden rent, about the time Vanessa asked me to book a hotel room in my name because her card was maxed out and she didn't want Liam asking questions. About how she once stood in my apartment kitchen crying over a shut-off notice, then posted photos the next day from a salon chair with fresh highlights and a caption about self-care. My mother covered her mouth. My father looked older by the minute, but I was not done. Do you know what hurt most? I asked. Not the money. Not even the insults. It was hearing you both laugh tonight before you knew I was going to answer. It was realizing that somewhere along the way, I became safe to disrespect. My mother started crying then. Real crying, not wounded parent crying. The kind that comes when your self-image cracks and there is no one to blame for the sound. I'm sorry, she whispered. I'm so sorry. My father's voice was rough when he spoke. I should have shut that toast down the second it started. Yes, I said. You should have. Some people would call that harsh. I call it accurate. Accuracy is not cruelty just because it refuses to decorate itself. My father nodded once, accepting it. You're right. The words were simple, but they changed the air. My entire life, peace in our family, had depended on me swallowing the truth faster than other people created problems. Hearing my father say I was right without rushing to excuse Vanessa felt almost disorienting. My mother wiped her face. What do you need from us now? That was the best question of the evening because it was the first one that centered my reality instead of their discomfort. I answered slowly. First, stop asking me to take calls, lend money, smooth things over, or explain Vanessa to herself. Second, don't tell me to forgive quickly just because the house feels tense. Third, if she insults me again in front of you, I want you to address it immediately, not after the fact. And fourth, do not confuse access to me with entitlement to me. My mother nodded through tears. My father nodded, too. That's fair. It's necessary, I corrected. Then he asked the question I knew was coming. Do you want us to make her repay you? I thought about that for a moment, not because I doubted the answer, but because I wanted to be honest about what the money meant. Yes, I said, but not because I need every dollar to survive. I need the debt acknowledged because the lie has been expensive in more than one way. My father leaned back in his chair. Then that's what happens. She will repay you. And if she needs to change her lifestyle, then she changes it. My mother gave a small shack and nod. No more rescuing. There was a long silence after that, but it was not the old kind. Not the kind stuffed with avoidance. This one had work inside it. Finally, my mother said, I think we made a habit of admiring Vanessa's shine and relying on your structure. I looked at her. That is the most honest sentence you've said all year. She almost laughed, then didn't. My father did once bitterly. And structure doesn't sparkle, so we took it for granted. Exactly. I folded my hands in my lap, so they would not see them shake. Standing up publicly had felt easier then. This. Public truth runs on adrenaline. Private truth runs on grief. I love you both, I said, but I am not doing this anymore. If the only way to stay close to this family is to keep getting diminished, then distance will be healthier than closeness. My mother reached for my hand, then stopped halfway, asking without words. I let her take it, not because everything was fixed. Nothing was fixed, but because boundaries are not walls when used properly. They are doors with locks. And for the first time, I finally had my hand on the key. Vanessa came back outside 20 minutes later with her mascara smudged and her anger rearranged into wounded pride. Liam was with her, but he stood a little apart, as though proximity had become a decision instead of a habit. My parents looked at her differently now. That was the quiet miracle of the night. Not that they suddenly stopped loving her. Parents rarely do. The miracle was that love had finally stopped blinding them. Sit down, my father said. She did. No performance, no dramatic sigh, just a rigid, tense drop into the patio chair across from us. My mother spoke first this time. You owe Mara an apology. Vanessa gave a short laugh that had no humor in it. So that's what this is, a tribunal? No, I said. It's the first normal conversation this family has had about your behavior in years. She looked at me with naked resentment. You humiliated me. You announced me as broke in front of 30 people. As a joke. No, my father said, and all four of us turned because he almost never interrupted her. It was not a joke. It was mean. And you knew exactly what you were doing. Vanessa stared at him as though he had switched languages mid-sentence. My mother swallowed hard and added, and the money is not a misunderstanding. It's debt. I watched those words hit her. Debt, not favor, not support. Not a temporary thing between sisters. Debt. That single label stripped years of pretty storytelling off the bones of what she had done. She looked at Liam, but he had nothing ready for her. Did you tell Mara I covered the rent? He asked quietly. She said nothing. Did you tell your parents she was the one always asking for help? Silence, Vanessa. His voice did not rise. It hardened. Did you? Yes, she muttered. No one moved for a second. Then my father said, You will repay Mara every dollar. We can help you build a plan, but we are not paying it for you. Her head snapped up. You'd make me struggle over this. Snorts. My mother's answer came before anyone else's. No, we're making you face what you created. I wish I could explain how startling that felt. My mother had spent so much of our lives buffering consequences before they reached Vanessa that hearing her stop felt like hearing a long stuck door finally open. Vanessa turned to me again. You know what? Fine. Take your money if it means that much to you. It does, I said. Not because I worship money, because I respect effort. Every dollar you treated casually cost me time you never valued. She rolled her eyes, but weaker now. You always have to make everything into some moral lesson. No, I said. Life did that. I'm just finally saying it out loud. Liam rubbed a hand over the back of his neck. I'm going home, he said. Vanessa looked at him in disbelief. Seriously? Yes, he said, because I don't know which part is worse, the debt, the lying, or the way you publicly tore down the person who covered for you. He looked at my parents. I'm sorry this happened here. Then he looked at me, and I'm sorry I believed it. He left without slamming anything, which somehow made it more final. Vanessa watched him go, stunned into stillness. That was the second real consequence of the night. The first was exposure. The second was loss. She stood to follow him, then stopped because there was no dramatic exit left to make. Snorts. My father gestured to the chair again. Sit, she sat. I had never seen her look small before, not because she had become innocent, but because arrogance had finally been separated from protection. You're going to apologize properly, my mother said. Vanessa looked at me with wet eyes full of anger, shame, and the stubbornness of someone forced to meet herself without lighting. I'm sorry, she said flatly. My father shook his head. Try again. She closed her eyes. When she opened them, her voice was different, lower, less polished. I'm sorry I used you, she said. I'm sorry I kept taking your help and then acting like you were beneath me. I'm sorry I lied to Liam. And I'm sorry I made you look like the